Hello and welcome back to Control Alt Lead, the podcast from computing where we talk to IT leaders about what's moving in the market. This week I'm joined by Alex Rutter, the EMEA MD for AI at Google Cloud, and of course we're going to be talking all about how IT leaders are working with AI today. So Alex, thank you so much for joining me today on Control Alt Lead.
Brilliant, Tom. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, great. Perhaps let's start off with a short introduction to yourself and your work with Google.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. So first of all, again, thank you for having me on. My day job at Google is I lead our AI go-to-market business across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So what that means is helping our clients and our partners understand the value of both AI and generative AI, its application to their business, the sorts of challenges that they might be addressing with that, but also looking at kind of long-term business change as a result of AI being adopted by their organization.
Okay. Obviously, AI is a huge topic for IT leaders today. And I would say in 2025, they're embracing it cautiously, but business leaders, people like the CEO, CFO, say, are still very eager to dive in. So how do you, specifically at Google Cloud, how are you bridging that gap?
Well, I think, as you said, business leaders are still keen to lean in, and it is very much at the CEO and CFO level from a conversation, but we're also seeing stakeholdership from across the business. It's affecting not just technology, but it's also affecting kind of multiple areas. So we're seeing chief human resource officers, chief procurement officers, supply chain, if you name it. As you said, AI can really be applied to multiple areas of the business. So there's two main fundamentals that we look at from a Google perspective. The first aspect is we're very keen on what we call kind of consumable AI that's really usable by a business to drive a business outcome. Now, those business outcomes can be defined as either increased operating profit, it could be increased revenues, or another statistic that's really important to them as an organization, something like customer satisfaction. And we do that by trying to bring the best of our portfolio, whether that is our kind of as-a-service solutions or it's our build products, to meet the business requirement that's been set out, and crucially to make sure the client is also seeing business value as a result of that investment. That secondary bit is something that we spend a lot of time focusing on. We help our clients do that with our advisory team in the AI space. So we have a bunch of business consultants that will help customers understand not just the transformational journey they need to go on, but also what the fiscal operating model will look like post kind of AI adoption.
Okay, great. I'd like to pick up what you said there about consumable AI, AI that is really useful, has a clear business benefit, because certainly in the last, say, 12 to 24 months, we've heard a lot about AI just being sprinkled onto products without this clear business case. So I'd love to ask you how IT leaders can push back against AI washing by vendors.
So that is it's a point of view I think most people have become quite familiar with. I think a lot, as you said, AI has been, I think, sprinkled was your word across it. I think what we're seeing is AI being included in a number of products across the organization and across the software stack more broadly, from a multitude of different organizations. From a Google perspective, we are actually very clear on how we are including AI capabilities across the portfolio, whether that is in our pure AI stack, so in the cloud AI business, but we're also, as you say, surfacing in other areas where generative AI can create a differentiated experience. So in our data analytics portfolio, as an example, bringing Gemini's large language model capability for search makes things just that much easier for users, and really it lowers the barrier to entry for some of those technologies that we're seeing today. It's also quite diversely brought in across the portfolio, from our Gemini for Workspace offering, in our core cloud AI, in some of our as-a-service offerings, things like Google Retail Search, and again, included in our build products, which is very much from our Vertex portfolio and some of our Gemini capabilities that you will have seen launched over the last year baked into that. It's one common Gemini recipe, and I think that's really important. We use the same capability across a number of different products. We just surface different aspects of that capability at once, trying to make integration as simple as possible. I think that's one of the challenges that lots of businesses have faced by looking at multiple capabilities, and we try to address that from a Google perspective by having one platform that utilizes one Gemini capability and then can be distributed to a number of different business applications.
Okay. And how are you getting around what we'll call the black box problem? Because a lot of the biggest AI tools today are effectively black boxes. You feed something in and you get an output, but with no input into or no visibility on how the AI tool has got there. So I'd love to know how you're solving that problem, and then also how IT leaders can be sure that they are getting the governance, the security, the compliance that they need according to modern regulations when AI tools are this sort of unknowable enigma.
Sure. Well, first of all, Tom, let's break down that conversation around the black box to start with, and then we'll come on to the regulatory piece. We'll break it into two. I think when you look at AI systems, Google, as I said at the start, has been very clear around this concept of consumable AI. Secondary to that, and equally important, is around transparent AI. So actually understanding what happens where and when throughout that process, and how those tools are used. Now, from a Google perspective, we have a incredibly open platform around AI, and we do that in a number of ways. The first one has been around our models. So you'll be familiar with our proprietary models, which are our Gemini portfolio. We have also made those open under the project name Gemma. So we're kind of trying to bring the best of both worlds into that space to drive transparency. When it comes to effectively the operational usage of AI within an organization, though, from a Google perspective, we begin with our platform capability, which is our Vertex product that I mentioned earlier. Now, within that, we include all these security, governance, control features that many enterprises and other organizations need today to ensure they have operational control, both at a security policy level, whether that's at a data access level, or just in terms of the specific model functionality they're using, all built within Vertex. The other control features that are there that are really important are around some of the biasy filters that organizations want, that are particularly relevant to things like brand representation, grounding services to ensure that the information that is presented back to either the internal user or the external customer can be grounded in a form of factuality, whether that is something like Google Search or whether some of our other grounding partners, people like Moody's or Reuters data, just to kind of hold things to task. The secondary aspects around governance, I think, is really important. We're seeing that become a more and more comprehensive topic as we go through some of the conversations with the clients in our regulated industries. I mean, I'll talk more about those in a moment. But we have been working very closely to bring some of those compliant regulatory statuses, things like VPC, SC, and other security portfolios to kind of bear to make sure that we are compliant in those environments. And we've seen that in customers like HSBC as an example, where they utilize our AI portfolio to drive an anti-money laundering solution that is obviously highly regulated, but also has to drive the right level of transparency to meet those regulatory statements.
Absolutely. Before we move on, I'd like to just bring it back to what you said about Gemma, the open model, because very recently, in January this year, we saw the launch of DeepSeek from China, a very now we know it's an open source model, this sort of low cost to train approach, and I wondered what Google's thoughts on that were, on this very different approach than Western companies are taking.
Well, Tom, so first of all, I think where we're coming from a Google angle is about bringing as much open choice to our clients as possible when it comes to models. So you mentioned the Gemma model. It is obviously Google's open source variant of our Gemini platform. When you look at kind of what customers are driving at today, we like to be able to offer a variety of capabilities. Now, within Vertex itself, the platform, we have a model garden, and actually today that provides access to over 150 models of varying shapes and sizes and complexities that really bring the best of all of those functionalities to our customer and consumer. So when we talk about that consumable AI product from Google, it's not necessarily driving just a Google first-party model answer. It's actually about embracing all of the models that are available across the market.
Great. All right. Interesting. Let's bring it back now to what we were talking about with IT leader use of AI. So there's a big focus, certainly on generative AI, Google, Gemini, Gemma, all being part of that. Where do you see the biggest near-term value for AI now for traditional enterprises, and perhaps also traditional use of AI, this big data analysis sort of setup?
Okay. So I think we've formed over the last 18 months kind of a very clear view from a value perspective as to where we see organizations utilizing generative AI and AI, so we shouldn't just bucket it as just the generative AI piece. We're very comfortable that this is a building stack of machine learning and AI and generative AI to create an outcome and an experience. And we really bucket those into 4 areas to kind of help shape the client conversation and based upon what we're seeing in the market. Probably the most exciting one right now for organizations around the concept that we refer to as knowledge management. So one of the age-old problems that have been around ever since I've been in the technology space is the ability for an enterprise or any organization to provide easy and frictionless access to all the information inside an organization. So regardless of where it stores, whether it's on-prem or in a multi-cloud environment, how do we provide a single view of data to enable a single view of insights across the organization? With the advent of large language models and generative AI technology, and more commonly kind of extension-based technology, we have been able to build a capability that we call agent space. And what that does is allow enterprises to holistically connect all the data sources inside their environment and search for it and provide insights to the employee at an employee level, or at the consumer level, or at the partner level. To try and create that sense of autonomy and to then future-proof that as a strategy, we've also baked in an agentic framework and agentic building capability. So not only now do we have a single place for all enterprise data to be connected, we're now facilitating the building of agents that allow people to operate and interact with that data on a daily basis, regardless of whether that is in, as I said, on-prem data stores, some of the market-leading third-party productivity tools that maybe extracting information from them has some value, or connecting into market-leading third-party SaaS vendors that are synonymous across the enterprise, perhaps surfacing it alongside different data sources would be really useful. The second area is around content production. So you may be familiar with our image and video creation tools, Imagen and Veo. I think that has taken the market really with pleasant surprise. We've seen lots of organizations that have really embraced the creation of new content and creations of new roles by finding next generation content creators. And for example, organizations like FreePick that have really embraced this concept of text to video and image to video to really create more engaging content has been something we've seen particularly kind of play out. Number 3 is around customer service. One of the things that AI obviously brings the ability to do is to interact with people and humans, consumers at scale like we've never been able to before in humanistic and very real-time, real-life engagement metrics. We're seeing applications across the customer service space around digital service interaction, and we're seeing incredibly high containment rates now for digital services. So really good example is an organization like Love Holidays here in the UK that have seen the ability to increase double the number of calls they can handle per day with no extra increase in call center staff, but also seen a huge jump in their net promoter score, as well as digital containment of upwards of 75%. The final area, which is one that I'm personally kind of quite excited about, is the ability to bring what we would call real-time streaming to the front end or at the edge of AI interaction. So you may be familiar with Project Astra that was launched at I/O. We've now launched a streaming capability inside our Gemini models, Gemini 2.0 and upwards, that effectively allows you to interact with the world around you through video or through a true multimodal sense, interact in real time and to get insights. And we're seeing some great use cases there for things like interactive customer service, break fix, or even some of the more complex use cases like field engineers checking wiring diagrams and other aspects like that.
Very interesting. You talked about AI agents and the agentic AI space there,
Yep.
I think in your second point. And I would love to know, because this is an area that's really interesting for IT leaders. It seems to be the next evolution of generative AI. I'd love to know what the uptake has been or what the interest has been like that you're seeing from a developer standpoint.
So developers have always been a core community to Google, and we've got a very large following in that space. We've got, I think, first of all, from a Gemini perspective, we have seen the number of developers using Gemini double from 2 to 4 million in the last 6 months. So it's really starting to get a huge amount of traction inside the marketplace. And we're seeing that grow for two very different reasons. One, the natural language processing and capabilities inside Gemini itself mean that the entry level for developers now with the low code or no code options are great for kind of starting those off on their journeys. Actually, the more skilled, the more profession orientated developer now has much more powerful controls at their fingertips to try and drive that. When that comes to agents or agentic capabilities specifically, we're seeing a very large uptake in two particular areas. One is around the desire to build or roll your own agents, which we're seeing across our agent builder capability, and will continue to extend as we mature the product over the coming months. What you will also see is a capability for effectively organizations to develop both in a low code, no code, and a high code environment inside agent space. So really drive that customized functionality, which is what businesses are really looking for, kind of in our experience, where we're seeing them deployed so far at scale.
Wonderful. Thank you. Alex, I've just got one final question for you because we're running up against time here. And I'm afraid I'm going to mention a competitor, which is Microsoft. So they are embedding AI into all of their enterprise software via Copilot.
Mm-hmm.
Google has Gemini, but where do you see your competitive advantage compared to, someone who really dominates the Windows or the desktop OS market?
So, look, Tom, I think first of all, I think the AI landscape is a brand new landscape for most organizations and most new companies to deal with. And at Google, what we're seeing is a very clear strategy and very clear uptake from our customers around 2 or 3 core areas. The first one is Google obviously has a very clear developmental line from our research capability around AI and other things from our Google DeepMind and Google Research organization into the cloud organization, our first-party model capability, and that as-a-service delivery capability. It is married with the productivity suite from Google for Gemini for Workspace, which means you've got that single integration layer, whether that is your enterprise environment or your productivity suite, again, all one format and one capability. I think where we're starting to see real differentiation from a Google perspective is around one, the single source organization around research, development, product, and go-to-market all within a single space. The models themselves from a Gemini perspective, as you may or may not see on the kind of Limsys benchmarks, are leading the way at the moment, and certainly the launch of Gemini 2.5, I think, not but Friday gone, is there to make sure we're continuing that leadership journey. And then finally, our customers are really embracing, as I said at the start, this approach that we have to consumable AI. It's making AI easy across the enterprise to adopt, whether that be as a service or within our build platform, but also maintaining that we have that common area of control, security, governance that really differentiates us, not just whether it's Google first-party models, but any of the models in the industry, trying to bring the best of AI to anyone that wants to use it across the organization.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Control Alt Lead, Alex.
Brilliant. Tom, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Control Alt Lead. Next time, I'll be talking to Joanna Drake, CIO at THG, formerly the Hut Group, about how she and her team transformed the company's e-commerce platform. This is a full end-to-end case study of a massive modernization project, and it's really worth listening to, with plenty of lessons that you can take away to your own company. See you there.